I went to the bar last night, and it was nice. I ran into some old friends, but I don't like that term for them. They're really like best acquaintances. You see them maybe twice, three times a year, but when you do, it's fucking killer. It's great. It's wonderful. Had a good time. Had quite a few drinks. Went to the bar with this like 80s dance party, I guess, but it looked like some sort of defunct nightmarish alternate reality since there were only like three people there. But the DJ was like, had so much energy. He was just going wild. It felt completely fucking bizarre. But that's also just Florida. But the cool part of this is that I came home. I wasn't really in the mood for a rager. Came home and put on The Ring. Have not seen The Ring since middle school, probably. I put on The Ring, Gore Verbinski's 2002 film, and I could only watch about 45 minutes of it. Not because I didn't enjoy it, but because it was scaring me too much. I was all alone. I did not remember The Ring being this scary. It scared the shit out of me, y'all. I'm not fucking kidding. This movie fucking freaked me out. To get down to the analysis, to the insight, to some food for thought, I'm sure there's something to be said about the J horror fascination of The Return. Some general housekeeping. The Return is something that we refer to on this channel as a movement within popular American filmmaking. It follows the postmodern wave, best characterized by the works of Kevin Williamson, with I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream, The Faculty, Urban Legend, just to name a few. And what the postmodern wave did was they deconstructed everything about the horror genre to where the films almost became anti-horror. They became manifestos of a sort for the I'm gonna blame the movies crowd. The society of the spectacle writ large and horrifyingly accurate. That's what the postmodern wave was, and the postmodern wave honestly ended with the Columbine killings. Movies don't make psychos, movies make psychos more creative. You may have got something like Cherry Falls or Final Destination, or even Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which was originally called Killing Mrs. Tingle after the tragedy of Columbine. But then 9/11 would happen, and horror had to reinvent itself by creating a double, by creating a twin, some sort of uncanny valley of returning to form, returning to 70s basics, mostly returning to 70s exploitation. But part of what defined postmodern horror films was their complete lack of supernatural attitudes. These aren't demons or undead monsters. The thing that will kill you is not a demon, is not some undead creature. What will kill you will be your boyfriend and his dumbass drooling best friend. It's something much more tactile and much more real. And why are they gonna kill you? Because they watched a few too many scary movies and they suffer from an extreme amount of violent misogyny. Supernatural attitudes were not a part of postmodernism. So part of the return, outside of returning to 70s exploitation with Rob Zombie, with Wrong Turn, with much of what Dark Castle would do, or like, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, The Hills Have Eyes, some new French extremism even. Part of it was returning to supernatural fears. The Ring is about returning to a supernatural enemy, a supernatural ghost. This is a ghost story. It's actually quite terrifying, and it does provide some commentary that would have been shared by Kevin Williamson in the postmodern teen slasher film of the late 90s. There's something to be said of the West's fascination with J-horror, and I think that I think the basic premise behind adapting all sorts of Japanese horror films for Western audiences was part of this idea of a return, was being allowed to make supernatural films, films that didn't really posture philosophically, films that had a more sincere goal of just scaring you. Because one of my favorite things about postmodernism is that even new sincerity, a postmodernist form of new sincerity is so unknown, so alien to us that when films like I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream 2 accomplish new sincerity through postmodernism, it still feels insincere. But on this channel, I love those films, and I would tell you that if you're looking for sincerity within cinema, then you're part of the problem. And the postmodern horror films understand this. New sincerity is terrifying because sincerity is the first casualty of every great horror film. But you get these films like The Ring, like The Grudge, basically every big film of The Return, but especially ones that borrowed their identity from J-horror. They have more sincere ambitions. They're not incredibly lofty. The Ring does provide some commentary about the effects of media. Obviously, it's about a videotape. The Ring walked so every YouTube ARG could run. It's about a videotape that if you watch it, you die 7 days later. This is absolutely making a statement about not only found footage, which was also kind of unfolding, innovating in its own way, alongside The Return. I think it can be like easily consolidated within The Return. I think that they share the same exact goals. Found footage have a bit more of a philosophical bite to them, which The Ring is able to also convey. 2002 was the era of grainy snuff films being circulated over the internet, was the era where terrifying films were being made public, where people were reeling from like grainy beheading videos, from grainy videos that they know they shouldn't be watching that scar them for life. And as a public, we're still reeling from the fact that movies don't make psychos, movies make psychos more creative. That's something from Scream that has never been undone because it's truthful. Movies can absolutely be bad for you. Media can absolutely be awful for you. The Ring provides a bit of commentary to it where it's a lot more, well, clearly it's a supernatural film, but it's also a little bit more of a truly, truly desperate one. Another large difference from postmodern films and The Return are the atmospherics. There's something very expansive about The Return. You get these landscape shots. You get reminded of nature, of lighthouses, of skylines, but massive sort of skylines that are kind of desolate as well. The Ring, most of it takes place within an urban center, and it feels very, very empty. It feels uninhabitable. Postmodern horror films were all about high schools, house parties, and college campuses. Postmodernism as a concept is hyper obsessed with ultra modern modes of existence and how living within this modern civilization is alienating in every single way and probably could help to weaponize certain young and media obsessed, hyperviolent young men. The alienation that you feel from living in postmodern, ultra modern world. Films like The Ring are really good examples of returning to a more expansive kind of horror movie where you feel utterly alone, where you feel like one dot, but there's not a bunch of dots around you, you're just alone. One of the best scenes of The Ring is where Naomi Watts, Rachel, is looking out over her balcony into all the different windows of the people who are living in the apartment building, I assume, next door, and they're all watching television. I guess the primary difference between what Scream would say about media, about movies don't make psychos, movies make psychos more creative, is that there is a very clear, it delineates, there's a very clear separation between the media and the people who are watching it, whereas in a postmodern horror film, those lines are completely obscured. Guy Debord's The Society of the Spectacle, the lines between the spectacle and actual reality are so arbitrary now that it's a meaningless distinction. Like we live in an artificial, theatrical existence. But The Return is more about there's a separation between the viewer and what is being viewed. Because when she's looking over her balcony and she's seeing everyone watching TV, it almost feels dystopic at times, which I'm not really into, honestly. But it's a bunch of people who look exhausted in bathrobes watching cartoons. Like they don't look to be an extension of the media, which I think takes part of why I'm so scared of media or why I think it's so inescapable away from it. That's like The Return does fuck up a lot on philosophy. In a lot of ways, it's one step forward, two steps back. It doesn't make sense. It definitely takes the bite away from the postmodern punishing of cinephiles because now it's clearly saying there's a complete separation. that you are a victim of the media, whereas something like Scream says it's cyclical, it's mutual. You are also affecting what you see. Whereas The Ring and The Return aren't too interested in that. I'm not going to spend really any time on the original The Ring, Ringu, mostly because I don't care for it. I don't really care for J horror at all, to be honest. But what interests me the most is how this was so applicable to the early 2000s in America, to the year after 9/11. As I've already covered, it reminds you of these grainy snuff films that get circulated, become the stuff of urban legend. But it also does deal with a certain amount of punishment. But we're going back to a more conservative time in horror films, honestly. We're going back to a more moralist time in horror films. You can kiss goodbye to the subversive nature of I Know What You Did Last Summer and Buffy. Kiss goodbye to those. We are back to stay together for the kids, to cookie cutter moralism, which is an issue. I do love The Return. I was a teenager during the era that was best defined by films like The Ring, and I do really like The Ring. I think Gore Verbinski. I think he's a great filmmaker. Actually, I think he's a very good commercial filmmaker. He knows what to do. This film does have like a green filter I could never get used to. It is extremely 2002, but it's also very frightening. The imagery, so much of it's actually pretty understated. It's kind of extraordinarily understated. I would liken it to Polanski. There's something very confident about the composition in the idea that I feel like Gore Verbinski knows exactly how to terrify you and he never overdoes it because he understands that this is a film not about limitations, but about restrictions. The Ring is a very good movie. I only take umbrage with the idea that I'm obsessed. Like I worship the postmodern teen slasher film, or even just the postmodern teen movie. What was popular from 1996 to 2001-ish. I am obsessed. I worship those films. Kevin Williamson is probably my favorite figure in all of media. I think he's done the best work ever. So when we get to The Return, and I feel like we're just kind of erasing what Scream accomplished when there's clearly more you can do. You just have to be inventive philosophically. I feel like it's just erasing all of the heavy lifting that the late 90s did. And we're going back to what's safe. And what's safe is being sincerely insincere. What is safe is cookie cutter moralism, which is what The Ring is all about. There are good guys and there are bad guys, like an old silent movie, and you're never implicated. Postmodern horror films liked to put you in the point of view of a killer. The postmodern horror films, Scream, The Faculty, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, these films wanted to make you complicit in the violence. The Ring, The Return, they victimize the audience again. The audience is the victim. Postmodern horror films are about punishment. The Ring, these kinds of films, is punishing in a certain way, but not in a disciplinary way, which is what made postmodern horror films so hard hitting, gave them so much bite and attitude and flavor. Punishment that you get from The Ring or from The Grudge or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hostel, Saw, the punishment that you get from those films is a victimization. You are once again the victim. You're once again being hunted by the terrible boogeyman. Whereas I thought that postmodern horror films were brilliant because in a large way you were the boogeyman. Films like Scream 2 compelled mania. The Ring simply wants to scare you. The Return wants to scare you. The era of popular horror and movie making in general, before this, they were just so much more philosophically complicated. The Ring is a very well made film. Noah and Rachel are extremely likable characters. Noah's death is still fascinating. Just a little aside, when Noah goes into a closet, he has stickers of Refused, one of my favorite bands of all time. And there's also like a Bad Religion and a Descendants and even a Pennywise sticker, but no one's perfect. Pennywise sucked. But I thought it was interesting that they made this character, I guess, a closet punk rocker who is really into these anti-capitalist, anti-religion bands. Bands that have these huge postmodern statements. Refused put out the best punk record ever written called The Shape of Punk to Come. But I think there is something really neat, and this can't be deliberate, but The Ring really did establish the shape of horror to come in its own way. And Noah's death is still one of the greatest death scenes of its time, of its generation. It is brilliant. The opening is very good too. I forgot how great and understated it was. The composition is so lovely, and it is truly a frightful film. As I said, I could not finish it. When I put it on, I'm like, okay, I'm alone. I don't want to get a nightmare from the fucking Ring, because it was gonna happen. It was gonna happen because it's a very well made horror movie. What excites and stimulates me the most from horror movies, from teen movies, is the idea that I'm sick, that I'm damaged. Not that I'm a would-be victim. I think that's really safe, and I think that's philosophically uninteresting. I do like that they have to make more copies of the tape in order to get away from the curse, to make sure more people see the media, getting everyone wrapped up in one person's singular tragedy. So there is a complicit nature to her having to make copies of the tape, but she's forced into that situation. This is still such a safe and I think cowardly way to interact with the effects of media on culture. Because you're forced to in The Ring. In films like Scream and The Faculty, you're just media obsessed because the world is a fucking spectacle, because the world is a showcase. The world is bad cabaret. Whereas in The Ring, it's this desolate, expansive, urban, dystopic, feels like a wasteland at times. A bit overdone, a bit too drab. And you're just so innocent because you're forced to make a copy of the tape and show it to other people. Boo fucking who? Postmodernism was about being accountable for the first time, about being accountable as a member of the spectacle. You're partly to blame. The Ring, oh no, the media is stronger than us. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Oh no, I'm not stronger than this videotape. I didn't help make it in some sort of way by simply existing within a spectacle of a society. And fuck that. Fucking so safe. Most horror fans just like things that are hyper literal, things that don't really involve too much involvement. I was about to say this isn't saying anything against The Ring, but it is absolutely. I mean, what else is it? I'm very, very, very much so criticizing Gore Verbinski's The Ring. But more than that, I'm criticizing this movement of films that was dominated by a complete lack of accountability and meta integrity. For me, horror will have always peaked in the late 90s. Always. Because those films were like a wrecking ball, not just to the genre itself, but to the viewers, to the audience. Mickey, Billy, hell, even Jill. Ghostface isn't one person. Ghostface is collaborative. Horror is collaborative. Murder within civilization, within culture is collaborative. Media is collaborative. You have to collaborate with violent media in order to be truly evil in a Scream film. Movies don't make psychos. Movies make psychos more creative. Thank you for watching my review of The Ring. I do really like it. Samara is a good little monster. I like her a lot. I know I said I didn't like J horror too much, but I do want to see. They had like The Grudge versus The Ring, and I saw a trailer for it. Looks wonderful. If you're still watching the video this far in, leave me a comment if you have seen The Ring versus The Grudge, the Japanese film. It looks wild. It looks like a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed this the video analysis of The Ring, what it represents to culture, especially within 2002, what it means to the horror genre and the horror landscape following the postmodern wave of horror. I've been your cult boyfriend. My name is Zach. Thank you for watching me. I should have told you you're gonna die in 7 days. Something. It's about this video. It doesn't have like a timestamp, so must be fucking supernatural. I don't know how to end videos.